Hey everyone, welcome back to Rides and Drives Team Radio. I'm Harvey and I'm here with,
Kaz, hi everybody.
and we are going to talk about one of our favorite subjects, which is IndyCar racing, as always. And specifically today, we wanted to talk about the car because that's big differentiator for the series, and it's also interesting what is happening now with some improvements that they're talking about making to this Dallara DW12 chassis that's been with us for oh so many years.
And I'm so excited to talk about this because as much as I am a racing fan, my knowledge of the interior working parts of the vehicle are pretty limited. So this is a really great opportunity for me to ask you all those stupid questions that I usually text to you randomly throughout the day. We can get them all done in one go.
Well,
So
I want to preface this by letting everyone know I am not an engineer. I'm not a designer. I also am a race fan who happens to have been in the industry for a long time. So there may be points where I go, we're going to have to look that one up or
we'll just
something.
go
But
on and
yeah,
Google it.
but
Post it in the comments.
yes, exactly. But we're going to have some fun talking about the car, talking about why, IndyCar is the single car series right now and the pros and cons of that. So you have questions, huh?
Yeah, so let's get started. I know that they tested two new components, upgraded components, one theoretically to go into use next year and one to be a part of the new chassis coming in 2028. So let's get started talking about those tests, what they changed and what we learned from the testing. So
Right.
let's start with next year's upgrade. What are we getting and how is it different?
Well, what they're looking at is a new brake package specifically for the ovals. Right now, all the brakes are the same regardless of what type of track that they run on. And what they're looking at doing, and they tested a couple of different brake packages from the IndyCar supplier. And what specifically they're looking to do is create a package that works better on the ovals, which means a couple of things. They want it to be lighter overall. And then what they're looking at doing is replacing a six piston rear caliper with a four piston rear caliper is one of the very specific changes. And what that will do is basically change the balance of the brakes to a more front bias system because you're going to have a six piston caliper up front and a four piston caliper in the back. Um, I again, not being an engineer, the way I kind of look at this is see in oval course specifically where really like Indianapolis, the only time you're going to get on the brakes is when you're coming to the pit stop, you hope,
Hmm.
right? The other
Hmm.
area where you might use the brakes hard would be in an emergency situation if someone spins in front of you or something like that and you need to take evasive action. But it's not like a road course where, every lap, like Road America coming down into turn five, you're hammering those brakes really hard and then turning into the corner, and you need a lot of uh, brake durability and you need a lot of balance stopping power so that you can
Sure.
go. Whereas with if you come around turn four at Indy and you hit the brakes to go, slow down to 60 miles an hour for that pit lane speed from, 200 miles an hour, you
Hmm.
need a lot of control of the front of the vehicle. And so biasing the brakes toward the front might make a lot of sense. And you can take a few pounds out of the rear brakes by changing those calipers. Everybody benefits.
Sure. Great. And I was tentatively really excited when I read this news because I didn't, everybody's talking about Indy largely because the tests were done there and about how the brakes perform there. I was thinking about Nashville and how many incidents we had running into pit lane at Nashville. And I'm pretty excited at the notion that there might be something to give them a little bit more control going in there. I love chaos on the ovals, but I don't want it to be chaos from something stupid and mechanical that we can just make better.
Right. And I'm not sure, which ovals that package is going to apply to. I'm
Sure.
guessing it'll be the super speedways like Nashville, like Indy, like Phoenix, I think is also considered a super speedway. But for the short ovals, you're probably going to have the other package, which because you do break going into the corners on
Yep.
those short ovals.
Sure. Well, good.
So
So that
that's,
to me that seems pretty straightforward. This
yeah,
is and drivers reported a pretty positive reaction.
right. Yeah, I think who was it? Sato, a
It
couple
was
of other.
Sato and Rossi.
Yeah. Yeah. So two guys with a lot of experience on
Yeah,
the oval, they'll know whether that's a positive change for the vehicle and for the series. So, well, we'll
definitely.
see.
That's
We'll see if
exactly
it
what I thought.
plays out that way. I think it's important for the series. They have constantly updated that car. I mean, it was
Mhm.
introduced in 2012, so it's been around for a long time, but it's not the same chassis today as it was back then because of all the changes that have been made to it.
Yep, absolutely. We're looking at a different vehicle.
Yeah.
Well, that one's straightforward. Great. I think we can all agree that that's worth moving forward with. Our second potential upgrade is coming theoretically in 2028 with the new chassis. Theoretically in 2028. We haven't heard otherwise yet.
Yeah.
Um,
This is kind of like a
yet.
Tesla launch where the
Yet.
dates keep changing and it has kept changing and changing and changing. Maybe
And you know
maybe
what?
28 will happen.
As long as they keep doing nice upgrade, I mean, I have no problem with the DW12. I'm sure that we can do better now, but
Right.
let's keep running it as long as they're not perfectly happy with what they're trying to introduce. Anyway, our theoretical future upgrade, it has to do with the dampers.
Yes.
And again, as a person who knows the major car parts, but not really anything more specific, talk to me about dampers. What do they do, and why are they so important, specifically in IndyCar?
Well, dampers control suspension rebound is basically a simple way to put it. When the suspension uh you have your springs and they control how much suspension um, will move back and forth. And what the dampers do is they keep it from going boing, 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 right?
Gotcha.
They damp the spring rates. And so it's a really important part of the car because some people like very firm dampers, some people like more subtle dampers that will allow for more suspension travel. It's a and it's something that they spend a lot of time tuning.
So
To the
you're alluding a bit to why is this so important in IndyCar specifically?
Yeah, I mean they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year throughout the season to tune the dampers and get them just right for the driver for every specific track. And
It's
and it,
also it's also one of very, very few pieces of the vehicle that they can actually touch and change as much as they want and really truly
exactly.
tailor to their drivers. This is a really changing it. The notion of them testing dampers is fine. This happens
Hmm.
fairly. People are testing dampers consistently all the time, but this happening now, suggesting that they might be moving toward a standardized damper,
Yeah.
is very big news.
Yeah, it is. It takes one more piece that and one of the very few pieces that the teams can tailor to their driver to what they want to achieve. And they're working with a company called Öhlins that's out of Sweden. I've driven Volvos with Öhlins suspension components in them. They're very well respected, great product line. So I'm sure they're doing incredible things with these. But again, it's one more thing that they're taking out of the team's hands, and it makes it again one step closer to that spec series. So, you know. Yeah, we have a chassis with some minor aero things that they can tweak. You get the engines, they're sealed, so you get your Chevy or you get your Honda, and you can't change that.
Touch it.
So it to me, as someone who has always liked the concept of the unfair advantage in racing, which is, figuring out how to, within the rules, tweak things just a little bit to bend the rules toward your favor. I've always felt that that was an important part of racing and an important part of racing to the development of the automobile. One of the great things about racing throughout history is racing leads to technological advantages that eventually find their way into the cars we buy and drive. And by moving away from a series where teams can really do that, I think we lose some of that and we lose some of the relevance that racing has to everyday drivers.
Sure. I hear you. I get it. I'm not sure I'm with you though. I love a development series. That's
Mhm.
fantastic. It's something different though. If you're going to be a spec series in my eyes, then you should be. Currently in IndyCar, they only allow them to customize just a very small amount of pieces. I'm honestly of the opinion I like the fact that anything can really happen in IndyCar in a way that it can't necessarily in developer series. Think about how you feel when a Prema popped up in the top five this year versus a Williams in Formula One. You
Right.
know, those are two completely different feelings and situations, and IndyCar allows for that. I think if that's part of what IndyCar has to offer and that's part of what's so exciting about it, then it's a good thing to keep it there. There are other places, by the way, where you can utilize the unfair advantage. There are good teams look for them everywhere.
Right.
So if we're taking away the unfair advantage here, and I love that concept too, by the way, like who's ahead at the apex?
Right.
Just don't break, guys. Um, I love that concept as well, but I just think in IndyCar that's not. I do hear your comments though about development and connection to the automotive industry. I'm with you on that.
Well, it's that balance between affordability. I mean,
Hmm.
the whole reason they went to a single chassis series was to make it affordable.
Yep.
Penske had started the arms race by developing their own cars back in the 80s, and, it was getting out of control. And so they said, okay, we'll go to Dallara. They can design a car. The price is going to be $350,000. And, anyone who wants one can buy one, right?
Yep.
And that works. But it also, when I look back through the years of the IndyCar series and, seeing the Eagles and the McLarens and the Lolas and the Marches and, all these other cars that came and did, interesting aerodynamic developments. And again, a lot of this happened before a lot of the science and physics really got to, it was certainly before computers. No one was
Sure.
designing cars. You had, guys
People
that
were pen and paper equation
eh,
drawing
drawing and
little
fit.
diagrams.
I mean, a great example of that was the gurney flap, right? It's a little ridge on the back of the rear spoiler
Hmm.
that really helps with downforce. Now, that was invented by Dan Gurney at Indy when he couldn't get enough rear downforce. And all of a sudden, he's like, let's try this. And he stuck a piece of aluminum on the back of the wing and it worked.
And lo and behold,
Yeah. And, it's just that I mean, there was so much romance in cars back then because it was about I'm going to draw something that looks like it's going to go fast and see how
sure.
that works. And Now, of course, I mean, we look at F1, you look at, World Endurance Championship cars, things like that. They're all designed by computer and,
Yeah, everything's modeled to death long before
right,
a single part is ever put together.
exactly. And that's racing now. And if you want to
Yeah.
win, if you want that hundredth of a second that you need to go from 10th in the grid to fifth in the grid, then you're going to be modeling that stuff. So,
I guess I just like that with IndyCar, anybody can succeed off of the merits of a great drive in a way that isn't necessarily present in some of the other series you just mentioned. But also, and maybe this is, I don't know, maybe this is just me being like a baby and I don't like to see my favorites do bad. But like, I don't want a situation where something happens to Alex's car and all of a sudden Alex Palou is racing in the middle because Alex Palou is one of the best racers on any grid in the world, and I want to watch him do his best work.
it, agreed. And then I'll throw a counter argument at that. This series in Formula One, where Red Bull started on the back foot and, Max was not competitive and the team fought through that. They figured it out. And now we have a championship fight on our hands. Maybe not,
Yeah.
but there's still a mathematical path to Max winning that championship because of, the freedom the teams have to compete, not just with driver talent, but engineering and design talent.
To change, alter, and develop. I hear you on that one. I will give you one more counterpoint. Um, and it's the ability to see two drivers battle for a championship consistently without this championship battle in Formula One is a great illustration of it. I think that if we were in a position where we could watch the top drivers in Formula One actually go wheel to wheel more frequently, we would be having a lot of fun. But the only two cars good enough to really do that right now are the McLarens, and we've only gotten that a few times. So,
Yeah.
I've said before on this podcast, I think it would be really cool to see Max and Alex fight it out wheel to wheel in a over the course of a full season. I think that about a lot of Formula One drivers,
Yeah.
and it's interesting to see Formula One drivers come, former Formula One drivers come over to IndyCar, and guys who maybe were never able to find a podium or find any kind of consistency are able to build these great careers and legacies. And I think that it's partially because you're not reliant on being the guy who gets tapped for the right team at the right time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's exactly true. And so IndyCar is really a driver series, right?
Mhm.
We're going to put you guys in very, very comparable equipment. And yeah, the teams, some teams are better at just putting everything together and making it work.
Yeah.
And,
And of course,
the
there's talent on the pit
Ganassi's,
wall
yeah,
and
the
strategy.
Ganaskis, right, and Andretti's and McLarens and Penske's, but we're seeing that gap narrow and narrow and narrow. Where like Foyt, this is an up and coming team, and they're going to be exciting to watch next year.
Yeah.
Prema can come in the first season, and boom, there they are. Getting the pole at Indy,
An,
crazy,
an absolutely notable season for
right?
them, which is nuts considering it was their team's first season.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
so I guess you're right. It's IndyCar is a driver's series, and about IndyCar, I like that. That's
yeah.
not what I want every race series to be, but that's what IndyCar is for me, and I like
No,
that it is that way.
yeah, but and when you talk about the pros and cons of a single chassis series, manufacturer series versus multi manufacturers, whether you're talking about NASCAR or IMSA or Formula One or Trans Am or some of the other ones, where it's you know closer to the manufacturers that we actually buy from. Um, I there are advantages there from a racing perspective, like you talked about. You get closer racing, you get more winners, you get championships that typically will go down to the wire. They haven't, they didn't last year because, Alex was as good as he was early in the season.
But
But, but
that's
the,
pretty rare.
the championship was a runaway, but none of the races were runaways,
Mm-mm.
right? We didn't have 30-second victories like you have in Formula One, you know?
Even early in the season, it never felt at the start of the race that Alex was definitely going to win.
Right,
He often did, but it never felt like it was in the championship was always an inevitability, but the individual race wins were not.
right. Yeah, and so the thing I miss though about not having manufacturer involvement in a series is it brings one more level of competition into it and
Sure.
one more passion point for fans. I remember when I was doing NASCAR marketing for Chevrolet back in the 80s. I literally saw two guys get in a fist fight over Ford versus Chevy, down at Daytona.
Oh my
There may
gosh.
have been some Budweiser involved in that,
Yeah,
but
just a few cans of beer going
yeah,
on.
but the Ford versus Chevy rivalry was real, back then, and it brought a lot of people you know, to the racetrack.
I remember when we talked to Kevin and kind of gave him an intro to IndyCar, and he was surprised to find out that there's not much McLaren about the McLaren outside of the colors. And you're right, they do kind of lose a connection there when the individual. But there are also so few teams in IndyCar now that are actually
Right.
making cars.
No, yeah,
So,
IndyCar is a racing series for race teams. It's
hmm
not for automakers to field
hmm
race teams like Formula One, where you have Cadillac, going in with a Formula One car. Now, engines are a different matter, right? We've got Honda and we've got Chevy in there now. Who knows how much longer Honda's going to be in play? They haven't made any announcements about that yet, but they have a contract that they need to decide whether to renew or not. Would it be fun to have a couple more engine manufacturers in there? I think so. And I think engine manufacturing makes sense for auto manufacturers because that's the real performance and durability component of the vehicle.
yeah, I think that's a nice compromise for us. For you who wants to see a little bit more variety, and for me who kind of wants to allow the drivers to really put the focus on themselves, then that's, yeah, let's multiple and more engines to choose from. And you're right, that also does introduce that connection that we can have to the cars themselves
Right.
in a way like, you know, I don't have
I
a
mean,
Chevrolet, but like I have a Chevy engine,
right.
like yeah, go willpower you and well, no, not
Yeah,
Will
let's
anymore.
let's
Not Will anymore.
let's get Subaru into IndyCar.
Oh my God. The driver who drives the Subaru engine would immediately be my very favorite.
No, but I mean, over the years, there have been so many different manufacturers in IndyCar. You've had,
Hmm
Mercedes manufactured engines for a time, Offenhauser, Ford,
hmm
Cosworth, Chevy, Buick had a program for a while. So it would be interesting, and I'm betting. And if I were running IndyCar, I would be banging on every manufacturer's door right now to try and get someone else in the program, at least to have a backstop in case Honda pulls out.
Yeah, especially given that the Honda contract isn't a given, they should be looking to add a third option
Be-
now
yeah,
so that
because
if Honda backs out, it's not
I think
dead in the
without
water.
two manufacturers, it's not, it really takes a lot out of the series. And you need that. You need some competition beyond the drivers.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, a team to root for. Sure. And
Right.
also just an interesting, I mean, I think it's interesting to look at how the two different engines perform. That's an
Yeah.
interesting piece of data that in and of itself is just kind of fun to think about.
Yeah, and how the teams go about it. I know we talk to the HRC guys about, their approach to developing the hybrid and, why they think they had an advantage. So, that to me, that is an exciting part of it. But we'll see. We'll see how that goes. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of the DW12 chassis as well,
I,
because I think
I
it's
think that's a great
interesting.
idea. It's a
This
it's a story.
this chassis has been uh, probably the longest used chassis in any race series, maybe in history. Um,
I know it's the longest used chassis in the history of IndyCar,
yeah,
but I don't know about any other series.
I
I
can't
would
think
agree
of
with
it.
you.
I mean, we're talking about 2012 to now, so
Yeah. And it
you know,
will run minimum through 2027. So
right,
that is 15 years.
right, which is a long time. I mean, maybe back in the early 1900s,
Sure.
1920s, there was a car that ran
A
for a number of,
chassis at that
yeah.
point was just a tube.
it was
It's
wood.
just like
Yeah,
it was just like a
wood
tube.
frame. And, but yeah, this to have it launched, came out of their previous Dallara chassis. Once when Champ Car and IRL merged, that's when they went to a single chassis,
Hmm.
to try and control that. They had the Panos chassis and the Dallara chassis for a while, but
Hmm.
then settled on the Dallara. Then came the DW12, which was developed, mostly 2011. And
Yep, they won the bid to develop it in 2010.
right. And so the development went through 2011. And they developed a really nice race car, right? Very competitive, all that. The one of the key drivers in the development was Dan Weldon.
Yeah.
And that's why it's called the DW chassis, because after Dan was killed in the crash in Las Vegas, a freak accident, he they did name that chassis after him in honor of him,
Very
which yeah,
appropriate. He was the first driver. He was the first test driver for the chassis. There are two other test drivers that same year whose names you might know.
hmm
Will Power and Scott Dixon were test drivers 2 and 3, which I thought was interesting. Yeah, to honor Dan with the name feels great, and I am a little disappointed to find that they're going back to the IR 28. I don't know, something about DW just feels right. Um,
yeah, but at the same time,
his
time
connection to
moves
the
on,
chassis
his
is gone.
connection, right? And and then part of that crash was the two tires coming together, and that's why you now have covered rear wheels in IndyCar.
I did read that part of why Dan's accident was so horrendous were things that the DW12 was already looking to correct.
Right,
So unfortunately not in time, but it does show that they were forward thinking and what they wanted to do with the vehicle and things that they saw as potential danger points that they wanted to correct.
right. And then they did make the other change, which is putting the aero screen on the car after
Mhm.
Justin Wilson's death. If another freak where the car in front of him goes into the wall, a piece comes off the car, hits him in the head as he's speeding by, and
Yeah.
you know, and 24 hours later, they take him off life support. Um, it's and then you put the aero screen on, and we haven't had a death in IndyCar since that happened. Knock wood. Um,
We haven't had a death in IndyCar since 2015,
yeah,
which does now mark 10 complete seasons.
and
Um,
we've seen some pretty horrendous high speed crashes, but
yes, we have.
between the safer barriers, between the stronger tubs and smarter designs about crash worthiness and how they reduce inertia by parts crumpling the right way or coming off the right way, all of that
All
Is
of
led to a much safer series.
all of this just kind of makes me feel to an extent, especially in relation to our conversation about Dallara and the chassis, we're kind of in the right hands.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I
Moving
mean,
moving forward with Dallara is is great. So we tested two new upgrades from them that they feel are going to be promising, and I'm excited to see how they go.
yeah. I hope that the 2028 car continues to bring as much competitiveness as this
Mhm.
chassis has over, the past 15 years. So, I would be surprised if we don't continue to see that. I think the big thing looking forward for IndyCar is engine manufacturers and engine technology, and how are we going to make sure that we have a competitive situation there as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, anything else you want to talk about in the car or the series?
No, I want to talk about everything all the time, but I think
I want
I'm
us to go racing, but
I know, I think I'm just really excited to get started,
yeah, just
and we're still a while.
watching some of the tests over the last few weeks was nice, just to see cars going around a track and
Hmm.
know that we're making progress towards St. Pete, and looking forward to kicking the season off in next year. So,
Yeah, I can't wait to see you guys at the track. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us on this episode of Rides and Drives Team Radio. I'm Kaz. I'm here with Harvey. And as always, drive safe.